Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today to talk about building mental resilience. My name is Stephanie Will. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I am the Mental Health Services Program Manager here at Montgomery College, and I work with our Student Health and Wellness Center for Success, or Shaw Center. If you're not familiar with the Shaw Center, we do a number of different types of programming. We have our Fuel for Success program that brings events like the mobile markets, lunch on the go, our grab and go snack bags to campus. We also have our social resource program that helps connect students with resources in the community and teaches them how to navigate those systems. We also have our health safety education program, which focuses on programming like bringing in the bystander training and sexual assault awareness and prevention. And our physical health wellness branch talks a little bit about just general health, like our flu shot clinics. We do fun exercise classes like yoga, Zumba, belly dancing. And then I, of course, run our mental health wellness branch. And we do all sorts of learning and stress relieving opportunities, things like the mental health first aid certification training and mindful Mondays and all sorts of activities and programs like this. So I'm very excited to be with you and to talk today about resilience, which is very much a buzzword nowadays. So I'm sure that's probably part of what brought you in today. It's something that a lot of people are saying we need to build resilience, right? And there's a reason, because it's really important. So today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk a little bit about stress and how stress impacts us in our daily functioning, how we, move from one task to the next, how we get from one day to the next. We're going to talk a little bit about resilience, defining it and discussing ways to actually help build that resilience. And then we're also going to talk about toxic positivity and why experiencing negative emotions is actually something that's really helpful for us. And I know that that can be surprising for some people, but we will talk plenty about it. So first, stress, right? This is something that everybody experiences. I don't know anybody who has never experienced a stressful event in their life, right? There is no way that we can remove all of the obstacles and just lead a completely and totally zen, relaxed life. At least I don't know of a way to do that. I don't know of a magic pill that can, do that or anything. It's something that we all share as, part of a common human experience. We're all going to experience some type of stress at some point in our life. The thing to know is there's actually two different types of stress. There's a good stress and there's a bad stress. Bad stress is probably what we're more familiar with. This is what's called distress. And when we get through a distressing event, we tend to be exhausted. We tend to have no energy. We might feel physically not very good and just very happy that the experience is over if we're able to even experience kind of anything other than a numbness at all. Eustress is actually a positive stress, and eustress events are things that are stressful, but they're within our perceived level of coping. So if you take a class that is definitely going to be more challenging, but you feel certain that this is a topic that I enjoy and it's something that I'll be able to get a lot out of. Or if you buy your first home, and if you have done that before, all the paperwork and all that is very stressful, but it's something that is really wonderful coming out the end. And that's what eustress events are. When you make it to the other side, when you finish up, you actually feel energized in a lot of ways. You feel like, yes, I did it. I accomplished something. That this was positive. Some other examples, starting a new job, maybe making a move, getting married, having children. There's a lot of different of these eustress events that definitely do stress us out. But we feel more excited when we can make it through them. The other thing about stress is it comes oftentimes on the heels of failure. But it's important to note that, again, like stress, everybody is going to fail at something at some point in their life, whether it's failing on an exam or failing a class altogether. We're going to have failed relationships, be it friendships or romantic relationships. we're going to get fired from jobs, we're going to be rejected, we're not going to be elected for certain things. There is always going to be failure at some point in our life. And that's okay. We hopefully, as we will discuss in the rest of this presentation, hopefully we learn from failure. Hopefully we gain something from that experience. But it's important to note that some failures are going to be more impactful than others. And that all depends on who you are and what's going on in your life. If you fail an exam, but that's pretty much the only like negative, stressful thing you have going on, then that might be upsetting, but it might not be too much. But if you're in the middle of a breakup and you fail an exam and you just got fired from your job, when they kind of pile on like that, it can be a lot harder to recover. And that's where resilience comes in. Resilience is all about thriving and not just surviving what is going on around us. It's the ability to bounce back after failure or disappointment. So I like to use the example of a rubber band. When you stretch it and you stretch, think of that as stress, just stretching your ability. And then eventually the stress ends, you let go and the rubber band snaps back to its original shape. It might not be 100% the original shape that it was, but that's what resilience is, being able to bounce back, snap back into shape, hopefully maybe a little bit different as we've taken some learning experiences and we grow and learn from our failures and disappointments. But since we all have adverse experiences, being able to thrive despite them, being able to become better people, essentially, is what resilience is all about. And when we build resilience, when we're able to be resilient in negative situations, it really does enhance our ability to be flexible and our ability to function just overall. And flexibility, we know, is so important. If COVID and the pandemic just taught us absolutely nothing, it's that sometimes we really do have to be flexible and be able to roll with what's going on. And there are certain people like me, I don't like being flexible. I like my nice little boxes, my structure, and that can be really hard. But the more flexible that we can be in certain situations, the better off we're going to be, and the more we're going to be able to bounce back when things are really stressful. So how do we actually build resilience? Because this is something that we can work on every single day. We're always going to have stressors. We're always going to have negative things going on. Like I said, just part of life. So we can use every single one of these opportunities to build resilience. So we're going to talk about each of these in more detail, but what we need to do is we need to build strong social connections. We need to develop self-awareness and self-care. We need to help improve attention and focus. We need to learn how to make meaning out of situations, and we need to develop a growth mindset. So the first of these is really to build strong social connections. And if you've ever been in a talk by me before, I really stress the importance of having your people, whoever your people may be. They may be friends, they may be family, they may be a religious group, they could be a club that you're part of. Whoever it is, having those social connections is really important. We all need a support system. So getting those people kind of in place so that you're able to support them and they're able to support you is really key to being able to be resilient in a lot of ways. And there's a number of ways that we can build those strong social connections with people. And the first of those is generosity. And it doesn't necessarily mean giving presents or, bribing people to be your friend or anything, but it's about being kind in thought and behavior. When we're generous to other people, that's maybe when we're reaching out when we know they've had a bad day, that generosity of behavior. If you maybe don't love going to other people's houses necessarily, but a person is sick, maybe going over and spending some time with them while they're feeling ill to kind of raise their spirits. Again, that kind of generosity of thought and behavior is really important and can really help build those foundations of friendship. Another thing that we can do is just have integrity in our actions. And integrity is all about doing the right thing when nobody's looking. It's easy to do the right thing when kind of all eyes are on you, or you're afraid that if someone finds out what decision you made, that it could have a negative consequence. But when it's those small moments and nobody's really going to know what decision you made one way or the other, having integrity is doing the right thing anyway, even if it's not the easy thing. And in friendships, that's so incredibly important. Humility. Humility can be a tough one sometimes, because I'm not saying humility in the way that we shouldn't be proud of ourselves or our accomplishments. It doesn't mean that we can't have expert knowledge in something, but being humble in relationships and in social experiences is really not letting your ego get in the way of what's going on. So understanding that I still have things to learn, right? I might be an expert in my field, but the learning is never done. Understanding that, hey, this person might have some additional knowledge that can help me. Um, I don't necessarily know any and everything. So, putting that humility into play is just about being open to new experiences, being open to learning new things and letting other people in that way. And then finally, authenticity is so important. Being true to yourself in your interactions with other people, because I'm sure you know people who are inauthentic. They're maybe putting on airs. They're trying to be somebody who they're not. They're maybe trying to be somebody who they think you'll like. Um, but those relationships tend not to be as strong because they're not really being who they are. And again, authenticity is not an excuse to treat people badly, or say or do mean things and be like, well, that's just my authentic self. But just recognizing who you are and bringing that person to your relationships, because that person does have a lot to offer. So those are some ways that you can be and look inside yourself, to help build those relationships, so that we're not just acquaintances with people, but we're really able to connect and have deeper, more meaningful relationships with other people in our life. Because when stressors happen, when failure happens, it's our social support network that we really rely on to help us, probably more than anything else. The next thing we need to think about is developing self awareness and self care. Um, I think there's very little in this world that's more important than self awareness and self care, because knowing who you are and knowing how to take care of yourself is so key to your mental health. So, one of the first keys to self awareness is self regulation. And really, that's our ability to alter our mood and behavior as necessary to the situation. So, it doesn't mean that we're turning off maybe negative emotions and experiences, but it's the ability to look around in a situation and say, okay, what is the appropriate way to express my feelings in this situation? If we're home, we're by ourselves and we're feeling frustrated, maybe we do want to scream or, throw a pillow or whatever the case may be. But if we're in our office at work or in a classroom, those aren't necessarily the most appropriate ways to express that at the time. So again, it's not about not expressing those emotions, but doing so in a way that is appropriate to the context. So self-regulation is um, a really important skill to have, and developing that really helps our self-awareness. Another thing is persistence, and that's just continuing toward our goals despite obstacles. And we all know that sometimes, especially if we have a lot of stressors going on, when an obstacle pops up, it's easy to kind of turn around and be like, you know what? No, it's not worth it. I don't care that much. Um, and in some cases, it might really not be something you want to continue working towards anymore, and that's fine. But for things that really matter, for goals that you really want to achieve, being able to be persistent and figure out ways around those obstacles is really going to be key. And that goes along with a tolerance for adversity. And that doesn't mean that we are necessarily wallowing in pain and negative experiences, but it means that we can't always necessarily process through every negative thing that we experience. And sometimes we do have to just sit in that emotional hardship. We need to sit in that pain and be okay with it. Whether you're going through a breakup, because there's no magic wand to fix a breakup. We can, go to therapy, we can talk to our social support network. But there are going to be moments where we just have to sit with that pain. And that's why building tolerance for adversity is so key in resilience, because that means that every negative thing we experience isn't necessarily going to beat us into the ground. Another thing that is important for us to learn is cognitive reframing. This is one of my favorite therapeutic techniques. I absolutely love it. But it's really noticing our negative thoughts and then figuring out how to place a positive spin on them. I like to use COVID as a really good example, because there's a lot of negative that goes along with COVID, right? We had to shut ourselves in our house, constantly worrying about money, about health, our social support system, are they okay? So there's a lot of negative about COVID. But cognitive reframing is taking all that negative and saying, you know what, there was something that came out of that was a positive. I was able to get 2 hours of my day back because I didn't have to commute into work every single day. So I was able to do some extra things around the house. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring all that negative that's going on. It's just about finding a silver lining, being able to see, what are some of the positives that came out of that negative situation. And then, of course, healthy habits. When we talk about self-care, especially, healthy habits are so, so important. Making sure that we're getting enough sleep, that we are getting proper nutrition. And that doesn't mean specialized diets or anything. That means making sure we're getting vegetables. That means making sure we're getting protein, fats, carbohydrates, that we are getting fun foods, right? That we are balancing the food that we're putting in our body as best we can to make sure that our body is getting all of those good vitamins and minerals it needs to run effectively. Healthy habits hobbies are a very large part of healthy habits as well. Most people are kind of like, what? Hobbies are a healthy habit? Absolutely. Doing things that you like, things that you enjoy. I mean, what's better self-care than that? I taught myself how to crochet. I'm not great, but I taught myself how to crochet. And that's a hobby that I'm really enjoying right now. Movement also, and movement doesn't necessarily mean getting up and going to the gym for an hour every day. I do not do that. I do not like the gym, so that's not my thing. But as we're working from home, or even going back to our offices, knowing that, okay, every so often I have to stand up, I have to walk around, I have to put my body in motion in some way, shape, or form. And again, another healthy habit is really reducing the number of mind-altering substances that we use unless they're prescribed by a doctor. So making sure we're not overusing alcohol, marijuana, other types of drugs. We understand that, some people like to do those things recreationally, but making sure we're not using them to excess, that we are impacting the way our body is functioning. All right, so improving attention and focus. This one's pretty straightforward, right? We need focus. That's our ability to sustain our attention and concentration. When we're having a conversation, when we're sitting in class, when we're in a meeting at work, are we able to concentrate on what's going on in front of us, or is our mind wandering? Being able to practice that concentration. This is where things like mindfulness can be really helpful. Doing mindfulness exercises where you just focus on your breathing. You don't change your breathing, you're not doing anything different, but you're just observing it. And that can help with focus as well, and being able to extend that attention. Curiosity is also really important for attention and focus. And curiosity is not necessarily about being nosy and knowing what everyone else is up to, but it's really about wanting to know the whys and the hows of the things going on around us. So, if you're assigned a paper or a project, what's the point of this? What is the goal of this? What am I supposed to be getting out of this experience? Because if we know what that intention is behind it, we're going to hopefully be able to get something positive out of the experience rather than just being there and doing something and not being able to take something away from it. And then I mentioned earlier, flexibility, that ability to adapt to new and changing circumstances. I think we have all had quite a bit of practice with improving our flexibility over the last 15 months. So hopefully we've all improved a little bit, and we're not all going to be necessarily flexible 100% of the time. There's always going to be situations where we feel a little bit more rigid, that we want things done a certain way, and that's okay. But in some of the big things, the larger stressful life events, being able to be flexible is really, really helpful with resilience. So continuing to practice being flexible in those types of situations is key. Making meaning. So this is another one of the things that I think is really important, because making meaning is really about giving things purpose. Whether they be events or assignments, relationships, all of these things. And purpose is about finding the value or significance in something. What is this really worth? What did I get from this experience? So even again, thinking about something along the lines of COVID, this is something negative, something that's been stressful, something that's been very traumatizing for a lot of people. But what am I getting out of this situation? What can I learn from this situation? Maybe I learned what I can handle or what I can tolerate. I learned what my limit is. Maybe it's you learned about how to maintain relationships through distance. There's a lot of different purposes or values that people can find from any type of situation, and that's all up to you what the purpose is, for you. And again, it's then about taking those things and then applying them to other situations moving forward. So if I now know that, this is my stress limit, this is the last thing I can take, moving forward, going back to school, maybe now I know, okay, I don't want to get into that situation again. So I maybe take fewer classes, or I change my major, or whatever the situation might be. But putting that knowledge and self-awareness from finding purpose, from finding value into play, because it doesn't matter if we find purpose if we don't then apply that elsewhere. And self-acceptance is another really important part of making meaning. And this is all about recognizing yourself for who you are and not attempting to change or protest or say, but. Self-acceptance is not saying, well, I love myself, but I could, do X, Y, or Z differently. Of course, we all have things to work on, right? We are a work in progress. We're always learning, we're always changing, we're always doing something different. But we don't have to be perfect to be a worthy person. And I'll say it again, you do not have to be perfect to be a worthy person. So understanding that, there might be things that will change about me, or I need to work on, but that doesn't mean that I can't accept myself for who I am and care about myself and love myself for who I am right now. And, if I change one day, that's fine. I will need to figure out how to accept and love myself at that point as well. We've talked a lot about having goals. Goals are great. Goals are important. It gives us something to strive for, something to work towards. But you don't need to achieve your goals to be worthy. You don't. You are already enough just as you are. with goals unfulfilled and all. Um, it's something that's really hard for people. We often like to say, well, I'll be happy when I accomplish this, or I'll be happy when I've completed this. Um, but again, self acceptance is really all about being able to be happy now, even when my goals are still in progress, or even if I don't achieve my goal, even if I fail spectacularly at my goal, I am still enough all on my own without having achieved goals. Your goals don't have to be big. It doesn't have to be, I want to publish my first novel within a year. Your goal can be, what, I've got a tough week coming up. So my goal is just going to be to do a little bit of extra self care every day. And if you do a little bit of extra self care every day, great, you've achieved your goal. But if you don't and you do end up getting really stressed out, that's okay too. It's okay to not be perfect. Working on gratitude is another great way to help make meaning. It helps us again look for the positive in situations and really helps us to, savor the moment. Because oftentimes we remember negative experiences a lot more than we remember positive experiences. So, at the end of the day, going back and writing a gratitude journal, or, some people like to put little gratitude statements on a slip of paper and put them in a jar and read them out at the end of the week. It really gives us the opportunity to reflect back on what are the things that have gone well. What are the things, who are the people in my life that have really made an impact? Um, Today, yesterday, this week. And it can really help us to see some of that light through, the darkness of the stressors that are going on in our life. And when we're able to see that light, that really helps to build hope and optimism. Hopelessness is one of the top signs that we look for when we're doing suicide assessments. If people don't see a reason to live, don't see a reason to carry on, that things are never going to change, things are never going to be different no matter how hard I work, that's a really hard place to be in. That's a person who's not experiencing resilience in that moment. They're having a really hard time bouncing back. And, that's okay if they're having a hard time bouncing back. But we want to figure out how to build that hope and build that resilience. Looking at what are the things that have gone well? What are the things that I can be grateful for? Caring about ourselves. What is the meaning in everything that's going on that I'm doing? It doesn't have to be some great and profound meaning. It doesn't have to be the all the knowledge of the world, or the great answer to the universe. It's whatever meaning is important to you, and that's it. It doesn't have to be some great philosophical thing. What means something to you? And then finally, all of this kind of helps us develop a growth mindset. And a growth mindset is all about acknowledging that we can learn from our challenges, that negative things aren't just things that happen to us. And, we get up, we move on, and then negative things happen to us again. We are able to increase our intelligence, increase our abilities, and we are able to put things into play that can help, if not eliminate the negative situations, because we'll never be able to eliminate them all, but can help us manage those negative situations in a lot more of an effective way. So we're really focusing on the process when we're talking about growth mindset. Yes, of course, the end result is great. We want to achieve our goals, but really looking at what are the steps that I took to achieve my goals? What was the progress that I made? What challenges did I have to overcome? How did I overcome those challenges? Did I overcome those challenges successfully, or did I not? Really focusing on that journey and being able to embrace our imperfections, because it's easy for somebody who maybe has an innate ability in English to get an A in their class, right? I like reading, I'm a good writer. So going into an English class is super easy. I get an A, doing my homework, kind of doing the minimum that I need to do, studying a little bit to get my good grade, right? But an inherent skill is great. I'm not putting down inherent skill. We all have things that we are better at. We all have, whether it's academic classes, whether it's working out at the gym, whatever the case it may be, we all have things that we're good at. But are we not going to applaud the effort of the person who English is really hard for, and they studied and they worked and they wrote their papers and rewrote their papers and asked for help from their professors and was part of tutoring groups, and worked with their classmates, but maybe they still got a C. Do we not applaud all the effort that person put in just because they didn't get an A? No, we really want to look at what is the effort that we've put in? What is it that we've done? What was the journey? And how can we use that to grow in a variety of different situations? Okay. So those are the different ways that we can help build resilience. And I always like to put this caveat on the end about toxic positivity, because I did talk a number of times, we talked about reframing, kind of finding that silver lining, making meaning, trying to find the positive in the sea of negative that we sometimes experience. But there is such a thing as toxic positivity. And if anybody knows, they know I'm a huge Grey's Anatomy fan. So this is one of my favorite gifts. Meredith saying, not everybody has to be happy all the time. That's not mental health, that's crap. And it's true. Because we as human beings experience a wide range of emotions, positive emotions and negative emotions. And we are entitled to feel angry. We're entitled to feel upset or sad. We're entitled to feel joy and happiness. Those are all part of our experience and part of who we are. But when we talk about toxic positivity, I'm sure like the good vibes only people, like check your problems at the door. I don't want to see any negativity. I don't want to hear about any negativity. And again, being hopeful, being optimistic, being able to find silver linings, those are great. But when it gets to the point where we're pretending to be happy, or we're filtering out anything negative so that we're just not focusing on it at all, that's when we get into that toxic positivity. And what's happening is we're actually giving more power to our negative emotions because we're not processing them. So by shoving them down and saying, I'm just going to ignore it, I'm going to ignore feeling sad, I'm going to ignore feeling angry, then what happens is it's going to end up kind of exploding at some point in time because we haven't processed them. We weren't able to sit with that adversity and just be in a negative space, because sometimes that's all we can do until we, ride out that feeling, ride out that emotion. And it's also making it impossible for us to really learn ourselves and learn the world around us when we don't experience our negative emotions, because our emotions do tell us so much about ourselves and the world. So again, being sad about about leaving a job means that, it could mean that it was a meaningful experience to you, that you liked your old job. But if we're having that toxic positivity, we might only be focused on, okay, I'm going to a new job and it's going to be great and it's going to be wonderful and I'm so looking forward to it. And I'm not thinking about the sadness that I'm experiencing from leaving my other job. But in not processing that sadness, we're not giving any sort of weight. We're not letting ourselves grieve leaving something that we cared about. And we need to be able to grieve when we make those choices, even though we might be very happy about going into a new situation, but we might need to grieve the situation that we're leaving behind. Again, being anxious about a presentation might mean for some people, you care about how you're perceived. And if we're only focusing on, the positives in that situation, we're not acknowledging that anxiety that we're experiencing, that can erupt into things like like stage fright. I don't love giving presentations. It's interesting how I ended up in this job. But if we don't acknowledge that we're feeling anxious, we can't do anything to help calm ourselves, right? Because if, oh, no, I'm not anxious. I'm not anxious at all. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not coping with the anxiety then. And then it can, take over in that situation. So we have to be careful that we're not ignoring those negative emotions, even though it's hard to process those negative emotions sometimes. But we owe it to ourselves to experience the whole range of what we feel. The last thing I want to talk about is self-compassion. And this is something that can be really hard for people. I also like to call self-compassion treating yourself with grace. Oftentimes with our family, with our friends, if they fail at something, if they struggle, we're like, don't worry about it. You'll get them next time. You can do it. We're really on their side. But when we ourselves struggle or fail, we tend to be very negative about it. We tend to beat ourselves up when we don't do as well as we expected to do. But the truth is, it is a common human experience that we will all struggle at some point. We will all fail at some point, like I said earlier, and that we are not perfect. But that's okay, and you're not alone. You are not the only person experiencing those negative feelings. You are not the only person who, didn't get elected to an officer position. You are not the only person who was ever fired from a job. So being able to really take comfort in knowing that I'm not alone is a really important thing, because when we fail, it can feel very isolating. But you need to know that you are enough just as you are. You don't need to be perfect to be a worthwhile person. So to kind of sum everything up, because I know I've said some things that sound like they're at the opposite ends of the spectrum, but really it's all about creating balance. That's how we build resilience. We want to be able to identify our negative emotions, and we want to be able to experience those negative emotions, but we don't want to be swept away by them. We want to be able to sit with them and sometimes just feel uncomfortable, because that's all we can do. But to let ourselves kind of go down into a whirlpool of anger and self-hatred, that's not helpful. So those are, some of those areas that we can employ self-compassion and, utilizing our social support network, so that while we're dealing with those negative emotions, we're not being swept away by them. We always also want to look at the details of a situation and see how we can improve and how we can adapt. So understanding you are enough, you can accept yourself without having to succeed, but we want to be able to grow, we want to be able to learn. And even though I'm worthy just as I am, it doesn't mean that I can't do things to continue to make my experience meaningful and worthwhile. And we also want to, again, be able to look for those silver linings and reframe situations as we can, so that while we also see the negative, we are really able to see some of the positives that come out of, again, even COVID and the pandemic, which is a really negative situation. We can all hopefully find at least one positive thing that came out of this experience. And again, just making sure that we're employing self-compassion as much as we possibly can, because life is tough, and the last thing we need is to be tough on ourselves. So thank you all so much for being here. I very much appreciate it, and I hope you found this topic to be helpful, and I hope you all go out from here and decide to build that resilience and practice those wonderful skills, so that you are able to stand back up the next time that you get knocked down. Thanks so much for being here.